At Odds and Ends by Corndog_Patrol and For the Wolfie on AO3. Chapter 20. The Book. Shouta had no idea how he was going to get through this dinner, but he somehow had to. Not only was he having dinner with the world's greatest vampire slayer, the very same man who had killed the vampire who vaporized Shouta's family and future, but he was also being vetted as a potential son-in-law. All Might's persona shifted drastically between juvenile and stern, as he tried to seem appropriate but also not too familiar. It was clear he wasn't used to walking this sort of tightrope. However, Hizashi was holding Shota's arm, and that gave him some comfort. The blonde was in a similar position of being judged, except his feelings were genuine. Hizashi liked him. Shota had no real cool clue why, but he'd known it for some time now. Nonetheless, it felt different after the blonde's confession. "So, tell me, Eraserhead," All Might said, drawing him from his thoughts. "Have you decided to retire as a slayer?" "I don't know yet," Shota said. Honestly, though, he would have liked. Even if... No, when he saved Eri. How could he possibly go back to being a slayer? He'd just be leaving her alone again, threatening her safety in the same way. What if she was taken again? "I haven't renewed my license yet." "I was very shocked when I heard what happened," All Might said, a little quieter. "You're a guest asset to the government. I would hope you return to your previous role once they regain their senses and bring you back." Shota offered only a non-committal shrug. Hisashi poked his head. "I'm not sure Shota could be a slayer and a donor." All Might paused, and something unsettling crossed his face. "Yes. I'm surprised they allowed you to become a donor after being a slayer at all, especially with a temporary discharge." So that's what the look was. Suspicious. Thankfully, Hisashi spoke up before he had a chance. "I made a few changes with his record," he said, parring the lie with a genuine smile. "After all, this was the only way we could even hope to be together. I know it's wrong, but she would never hurt me. I trust him." Shota nodded in agreement, although he felt woozy when he did so. At least his heartbeat stayed consistent, and that was all that mattered, especially if All Might really was a hybrid. They finally reached the dining room, the fancier one with the elongated table and the windows to the garden. They sat down but kept their seats together, rather than at opposite ends. Shota's chair was close to Hisashi's, that the armrests were touching, and their knees were practically glued together beneath the table. "So," said All Might as he sat down, the chair creaking beneath his weight. "Tell me more about how you met." "Shota saved me," Hisashi said immediately, without any hesitation or delay in his voice. Unlike Shota, the man must have been preparing for a return to the topic. "I was walking through the city some time ago, one of the human districts, to pick up some new violin strings when I got jumped by three men. They were really tall, and I had Tsurugi wait for me in the car, so I was alone. When they found out I was a vampire, they weren't even fazed. In fact, they just saw that as a better reason to attack me. One grabbed my wrist, and then the next thing I knew, I was flying through the fog and Shota was in front of me." Shota could picture the scene in his mind. The cold, fog lantern air, and Hisashi standing beneath a lone street lamp, while three men menaced him. His mind even concatenated the image of himself, waiting just out of sight for his help to be completely necessary. He fabricated details that Hisashi didn't touch on, a plan that he'd been on his way home, and a motive that he'd been drawn there by the sound of Hisashi's voice. He could imagine it so clearly that he could almost feel the cold dancing on his skin, and he could almost hear whatever the fake Hisashi would have said. "You hadn't screamed or anything," said Shota, catching the attention of the table. "You were fierce, as you tried to talk your way out of it without seeming weak. I doubted you needed my help at all." Both All Might and Hisashi smiled at the added details. Those lies, at least, proved Shouta had some understanding of Hisashi and his behavior. No way he would be scared screaming at a bunch of thugs. Hisashi was braver than that. But you came, Hisashi said, so softly it made him tremble, and he squeezed his hand affectionately. They looked at each other, and Shouta realized just how close they were sitting. There were only inches between their lips. If he hadn't been so inclined, he would have kissed Hisashi with ease. Shota's heart sped up at the thought and hurriedly turned away. Sounds like something Eraserhead would do. All Might cut in with a good-natured laugh. I've heard many stories about him jumping into peril to save people, even vampires. Although I do think he needs to look out for himself more, especially now he has a handsome hand to come home to. Shouta nodded, continuing to avoid Hisashi's face. When Nomori came in with a bottle of wine, she filled the glasses with the crimson liquid, smiling at the while. Obra has prepared a super tasty dinner for you all, especially considering the short notice. It should be out soon. All Might look sheepish. I'm sorry about calling in unannounced. You all know how busy my schedule is, and I just decided to pop in while I had an opening. Ever since the attack, I've been both concerned and interested. Concerned? Asked Shouta, keeping his voice level. About what? Had the vampire slayer been concerned about Shota's true intentions? By the attack, of course. All Might pursed his lips and twiddled his thumbs. None of the villains were arrested or talking. I'm concerned they might somehow send more of their friends here to hurt you. We still don't know if they had a secondary motive for the attack. Shouta relaxed. Of course, All Might would be concerned about that. He'd been Hisashi's father even longer than Hisashi's biological father had been. Since Shouta couldn't help but smile to himself, Hisashi had been raised by this man, and he could see a lot of the same mannerisms in him. Honestly, All Might was a great role model. Certainly, Shouta had been looking up for him for years. Shouta picked up his wine and took a sip. And of course, the veteran slayer continued. I was also interested in the man you'd fall in love with. I know how high your standards are, after all. Shouta nearly choked on his mouthful of wine. He'd managed to force it down, but he could not resist the remark of high standards. Super high standards, Hisashi quickly said, squeezing Shota's hand more firmly. You're just being modest, Sho. You're a catch. Shouta didn't agree with that, especially after everything he'd put Hisashi through. But he was fine to just nod along with it. I guess I do have high standards too. Hisashi squeezed his hand twice, although he didn't know if that meant he was doing a good job or a bad one. Hopefully the meal came out before he needed to be said, and the conversation fell into easier topics. Apparently Hisashi had a knack for this. He brought up one of All Might's famous moments of heroism, and then the veteran would do the rest, discussing the event for a lengthy amount of time. All Shouta had to do was nod again as he ate, although he would have been lying if he said he wasn't genuinely intrigued by the older man's story, especially those about vampire slaying. The topic of Hisashi's birth parents was partially avoided, as if the memory alone had cautionary signs posted around it. But that didn't stop All Might from eventually asking, What about your family, Shouta? Have they met Hisashi yet? His stomach felt icy at the mention. They're gone, he said, hoping the conversation would end there. The table went deadly silent. When Shouta looked up, All Might was staring at him like he had been stabbed through the heart. Is that why you became a vampire slayer, Shouta? The once juvenile voice was now grave. It was the voice of a man who'd seen countless families destroyed by rogue vampires. Hisashi's fingers tenderly rubbed at the back of Shota's hand, offering him some comfort. Yeah, Shouta finally said, his own voice a mere whisper. A vampire killed them. I'm so sorry to hear that. You do have a reputation for hating vampires, All Might added. So I always wondered. I suppose that's another reason I'm surprised by your union. Hisashi's different. The words had practically flung themselves from Shota's lips, and even he was surprised by what he said. In fact, he continued, less forcefully, I've been really surprised by all the vampires here. I guess I've never been close to any vampires before. He could feel Hisashi's eyes on him. His heart was racing, even though he told the truth. I see. There was something soft in All Might's gaze. I can definitely see how you met Hisashi's high standards, and I think I could trust you too. Shota was surprised by the remark, but not as surprised as he was when a puff of smoke enveloped the Slayer. When it disappeared, All Might was gone, and all that was left was the skeletal man with a sheepish smile and the same soft eyes. I know you're a hybrid, Eraserhead, so I think you'll be more accepting of this than anyone else. So he really was a hybrid. That was how he managed to save Hisashi from his silver bullet wound at the age of 10, although he still had no clue how he saved him from going feral. Needless to say, as long as you care for Hisashi and give him the love he deserves, All Might said, not noticing Shota's train of thought. Then I have no issue with you being a hybrid, or a vampire slayer. Something Hisashi had said finally sunk in. I mean, you and All Might have a lot in common. Like you both decided to take in an orphan who had no one else. They really were alike. Do you know exactly why the government took my license away? Shouta asked. His voice seemed to echo in the room. He strained his ear for a reply, but there was some hesitation before an answer came. As I understand it, All Might murmured, quietly. Your apartment building burned down. I imagine you lost a number of irreplaceable mementos in the fire. I can see why they granted you some time to recuperate from such a loss. Shouta deflated a little. He only noticed that Hisashi was squeezing his hand, although he didn't say anything. Perhaps there was a role for All Might, after all. But could Shouta really trust him? Do you know about Overhaul? Shouta asked. All Might's expression immediately grew grave. He undoubtedly rescued a number of humans from his cronies, but without the substantial evidence to tie it back to the villainous ringleader. He has burned countless buildings down in the past to destroy evidence. All Might was either smart or well educated on the human trafficker if he immediately made the connection between Shota's fire and the mention of Overhaul. If he had been on the panel, Shouta had been beseeched, then his story might have been a bit different. What would be his motive? I rescued someone from his clutches. He wanted her back. Shouta breathed deeply. He was pulling all his faith in Hisashi's judgment. The real reason the government took my license was because Overhaul took my daughter during the blaze. Hisashi stiffened beside him, as if he was holding his breath, while All Might simply looked shocked. The rhythm pendulum swung from the dining room clock was the only noise that filled the void. Finally, the veteran slayer shattered the silence. Overhaul has a lot of friends in the government. It was a simple statement, but it spoke volumes. The greatest vampire slayer who had ever lived was on Shota's side. Tears almost welled up in his eyes at the sheer relief. He clung tightly to Hisashi without even realizing it. Shouta wasn't crazy. They never found her body in the fire, Shouta said, mouth feeling unbearably dry. Overhaul kidnapped her. She's alive, somewhere in his fortress. You don't think he's hidden her with one of his groups? Asked All Might. It was a relevant question, one that only someone acutely aware of Overhaul's outstretch would think to ask. She's too important. Besides, I was able to save her originally because she was hidden in one of the minor gangs. He wouldn't make that mistake again. All Might looked to Hisashi, and for a moment, Shouta was worried. Of course, the man would realize that he had been using the influential vampire for a reason. This was the moment they gave up their act. And then All Might would never forgive him for treating Hizashi the way he had, like a pawn on a chessboard. Shouta would deserve it. However, instead of calling him out on his actions, All Might said, "I'm glad you found someone who's willing to help you save her, and I'm glad you told me." Hizashi rested his head on Shota's shoulder. The act continued. "We were going to rescue her during Oberhall's ball," Hizashi explained. "However, only the two of us are allowed in with our invitations, and there's a chance we'll be walking into an ambush." "A covert rescue?" All Might nodded, approvingly. "However, if the two of you get captured as well, you won't be much help to the child of yours. We have a plan, or at least the start of one. We'll perform, and afterwards, Shouta can sneak off and find her." "You both certainly have the skills for the operation. A racerhead is formidable, and you were always an excellent pupil for your self-defense classes. Hizashi might be your wild card, if Oberhall isn't aware that I'm his father. However, you'll need a backup plan." "You don't mind Hizashi putting his life in danger to help me?" Shouta asked, drawing the attention back to him. All Might looked surprised by the question. "He's my son," he said simply, like it explained everything. "And he's finally found someone he loves. You both have my full support. Oberhall needs to be brought down." He paused for a moment, and then quickly pulled a book from his back pocket. It was old and faded, but Shouta could just make out the word, "Parenting," on the front. "However, I can't just sit idly while you risk yourselves to bring down Oberhall." To Shota's surprise, the veteran slayer offered the book to him. He took it, feeling the cover that had been worn smooth from use, and his fingers brushed over the dog-eared pages. A few scratches of ink and faded sticky notes informed him it had been heavily annotated. "The book says that at the end of the day, your child will start a family of their own, and it's a parent's job to take a step back, but to still be there in case things take a turn. So that's what I'll do for you." Toshinori leaned forward in his chair. "I'll be your plan B. It'll be your job to rescue your daughter, correctly. But if you take too long, or I feel you're in danger, I won't hesitate to storm the place and rescue you. I imagine your friends feel the same." Shouta couldn't believe what he was hearing. Not only did All Might believe him without question, but he was willing to go against the government to help. "If you did that, and we couldn't find enough proof to stop Overhaul, you'd lose your job, if not more. They'll have the right to imprison you." Shouta squeezed the book in his hand, trying to think of some reason it would benefit All Might to help him, but... "Tell me about your daughter." The man sounded calm and smoothing. Shouta squeezed relentlessly a little. "Her name is Eri. She's 6, I think, anyway. We celebrated her birthday a few weeks ago before she was taken, since she'd never celebrated one before. She loves cats, but my apartment is too small for one. It was too small for her as well, but... When you rescued her, you didn't tell your superiors. She could have been evidence against Oberhall." Shouta shook his head. "Oberhall has friends in high places, so I don't trust her with the government. Besides, she's 6. I just wanted her to forget the past ever happened." "Why not put her in an orphanage?" His stomach turned and his eyes snapped to meet Toshinori's. "I couldn't let her end up like me." There was a tense silence, ended only when Shouta offered the parenting book back to the other slayer. However, even though Toshinori glanced it over, he didn't take it. "Keep it," he said. "You're gonna need it after you rescue your daughter." No words better describe the feeling that flooded through Shouta after hearing that. Hope. Not only could he rely on Hizashi, but he now had the greatest vampire slayer in the world as a plan B, in case their rescue plan went away. Shouta held the book close, his body automatically leaning against Hizashi. "Thank you." There were people he could trust, after all. Woo! Let's go! We have a plan that looks to be looking up. Isn't that great? Isn't that amazing? Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that just immaculate? I think it is. I think it is. This is a very interesting chapter, clearly, because, you know, they're fake dating, kind of. Shouta, I noticed that you wanted to kiss Hizashi. And, you know, like that one Ariel song says, just kiss the boy. Well, it says the girl, but whatever, you get my point. Kiss. I'm pretty sure we're all sitting here thinking that same thing. Kiss, 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 kiss. This is a very heartwarming chapter because obviously here All Might probably is thinking, oh, my son, he's gonna settle down, he's gonna get married, he has a daughter. Little does he know this is fake. Unless that's what actually happens. You'll have to figure that out. You'll have to read ahead or wait till the next video to find that out. But yeah, I don't really have much to say in this chapter. I think this chapter was sweet, heartwarming. I think the passing down or the parent book, I think the first time I read it, I was like, my heart, stabbing it and taking out the knife wound. I love that. Also, yeah, I can see All Might owning a damn parent book. He has a book on how to be a fucking teacher. He'd have a parent book. Yeah, no, he'd have a parent book. Definitely. You cannot prove me otherwise. He definitely has a motherfucking fucking parent book. And you know what? That is hilarious to me, the fact that he would have a parent book. And I headcanon that. Whenever he has a child, he has a parent book. Not even just that. He gets a dog, he has a book on how to be a good dog parent. He gets a cat, book on how to be a good cat parent. Whatever he's doing, he has a book of. He probably has a library of just a bunch of different books, right? Teaching, cats, dogs, household chores, how to be a good mentor. I feel like he has that. That's a headcanon now. Thank you for the Wolfie for that headcanon. I now headcanon that. It is headcanoned. I will never let go of that. As always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and my socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.